The best way to create lasting change is through repeated, small, reinforcing steps. Building trust is no exception. It requires evidence and reinforcement. Another way to increase the trust others place in you is to audition for it by finding opportunities to work together on a low-risk task, which gives you a chance to demonstrate your competence and integrity. For example, offer to jointly organize a Lunch and Learn series where people, not just you, can showcase their abilities. Look for situations that require minimal investments and for which the opportunity and failure costs are low. Demonstrate your own trustworthiness within that context, and then, over time, build up to larger and more significant demonstrations to reinforce the trust you're establishing. Engage in status quo communication. Leaders know how important it is to communicate when things change. However, when things are in a constant state of flux, leaders also need to communicate about things that aren't changing. Given that trust depends so heavily on predictability, leaders must recognize the critical importance of helping employees understand what they can count on. Doing so reduces uncertainty and creates a needed sense of stability. Assume one-size-fits-none trusting. Trust building, maintenance, and recovery work differently for different types of people, who fall into two broad categories: automatic trusters and evidence-based trusters. Automatic trusters approach a new relationship with at least some level of trust as the default, initially trusting the other party unless something happens to break that trust. This isn't blind trust, but rather an inclination to give the benefit of the doubt. They are minimally affected by fewer trust-building cues, and trust infractions trigger a challenge to their self-image, provoking a more severe and long-lasting backlash. Evidence-based trusters approach a new relationship with distrust as the default, not exposing themselves to risk until the other party has proven their trustworthiness. The lack of evidence characteristic of remote work makes it significantly more difficult to establish trust in virtual environments. Once trust is established, based on accumulated evidence, only major infractions are likely to significantly counter or undo that evidence. A critical first step is to not assume that others build trust as you do. With that in mind, you must do the homework required to know both your own and your counterpart's approaches to trusting and put in the effort to adapt accordingly. If you're an automatic truster and your counterpart is more evidence-based, you need to slow down your expectations and focus on providing that person with ongoing, repeated evidence of your predictability and trustworthiness. If you're building the evidence for your trust case and your counterpart is trusting you on arrival, it's critical that you keep an eye out for your own behaviors that may signal an infraction for them. To maintain morale and avoid negative outcomes like increased attrition in a remote and hybrid workforce, leaders must take steps to establish or reestablish trust among their employees.
2. What Psychological Safety Looks Like in a Hybrid Workplace by Amy C. Edmondson and Mark Mortensen. Since the pandemic changed the landscape of work, much attention has been given to the more visible aspects of WFH, including the challenges of managing people from a distance, including reduced trust and new power dynamics. But a far less visible factor may dramatically influence the effectiveness of hybrid workplaces. Sorting out new forms of work arrangements and attending to employees' inevitable anxiety about those arrangements requires managers to rethink and expand one of the strongest proven predictors of team effectiveness, psychological safety. How new forms of work affect psychological safety. Psychological safety, the belief that one can speak up without risk of punishment or humiliation, has been well established as a critical driver of high-quality decision-making, healthy group dynamics and interpersonal relationships, greater innovation, and more effective execution in organizations. Simple as it may be to understand, Amy's work has shown how hard it is to establish and maintain psychological safety, even in the most straightforward, factual, and critical contexts. For example,